Welcome to See It, Decree It, Be It, the inspiring podcast hosted by Chanel Swain. Join us on a journey of inspiration and transformation as we celebrate the power of resiliency.
Yes, we are. There we go. Now it's official. So again, thank you, gentlemen, for showing up. I appreciate you for all both of you are doing in the community and have been doing for a long time, Mr. Shabazz. I'm so honored to have you here with us. This is your girl, Chanel, and I will just say today is my first podcast, and I'm so excited.
Congratulations.
You just can't hide it.
Thank you. And I really felt it would be important to highlight a topic that's important to all of us. The name of my company is Manifest My Blessing, and our tagline is See It, Decree It, Be It. And my goal, my lifelong goal, is to always encourage those whose path I happen to cross or who I connect with, to inspire them to see it, decree it, and be it. Mm-hmm. And we can't do that when we have Black men killing each other. And it's such an important topic. It's been a topic that you have covered, Brother Shabazz, for a long time on your journey. And I thank you for that. I've been a guest on your show many times. And let me just properly introduce who we have here today with us. We have the Honorable, legendary, Wanique Shabazz, Chief Operator and Operations Director over at WRFG FM 89.3 Radio in Atlanta, Georgia. He is many, many, many things. Wow, I mean, your bio is so long. We'd be here till tomorrow.
You don't do that.
Me reading all of this off, but let me just say, this is a brother who I've known personally. I consider to be a wonderful mentor. He's been a mentor to me for many, many years. I've, again, been a host on his program and actually will be a guest on his program tonight.
Yes, hey, that was a trade-off.
Yes.
Great.
My pleasure. And this brother has done a lot for our community and really has been a powerful voice in advocating for self-love of Black people, and unity of Black people. And so when I reached out to you and asked you to be a part of this, I really meant it when I said, I can't do this conversation without you. I don't care if it's just you and I. I know that you are a man who walks the walk and talks the talk. You've really been on this crusade for a long time, on this journey of empowering Black people. And I just thank you so much for that. And I really want to speak to you about it. And so thank you for showing up. And our next young brother that we have with us, his name is Brian Ellison. He's a successful entrepreneur from Atlanta, Georgia also. And he owns several successful businesses. He's obviously a Black man, and he's a family man. He's a married man. He has a beautiful family. And I know he's been directly impacted by this topic. We actually have a mutual friend who was murdered by the hands of another Black man. And that's actually how I know this brother. But I would just say thank you, Brian, for what you do, because you are also a positive brother. And I just thank you for showing up and being open and willing to talk about this topic, this very sensitive topic. And I also know it became aware to me that you also have a family member who was murdered, a child, 14 years old. Yep. who was murdered. And I give my condolences to you and your family and your prayers. And I guess we would I would like to start it by asking first, how has Black on Black crime impacted you as a person, as a Black man?
You said me?
Yes, Brian. I wanted to start with you and just ask you, from your personal experience as a young Black man, how has...
Well, excuse me, as I grew up in Atlanta, it wasn't as bad. My dad, my family, they all went to college and stuff. So I didn't have like a street upbringing. My dad went to Morehouse. He actually works for a radio station, or he volunteers at a radio station. I'm not sure if it's the same radio station as the other gentleman works at, but anyway, so as I grew up, it just got a little bit more violent for me in terms of just my surroundings and my life and the people that I surrounded myself with. So, in terms of getting into trouble, trying to sell weed and trying to just live this street lifestyle was something that I kind of chose to do. And just kind of with my surroundings, like I said. And so, like I said, as I grew up, it became something that, started out as something fun that we were just doing as kids. Then people started dying and going to jail for life. And then we had to decide whether we were going to keep doing this or whether we were going to try to do something different. And like I say, most of my friends didn't make it. But, I was blessed enough to decide to start doing some different things. And that's when I met you. I was trying to get into the tattoo shop industry and smoke with somebody who helped me get some different options from what I was seeing every day. And so he definitely was a positive influence who pushed me, like I say, to do legal things. And so that's how I got out of, selling weed and doing illegal stuff every day. So, violence, but he ended up dying or being killed due to people breaking into cars in the area of his shop. After I left the tattoo shop, he continued to own it by himself. So yeah, he ended up getting killed, unfortunately.
How did his death impact you?
Well, it definitely impacted me. He was a mentor. He was, I would say, my best friend. I was at his house the day before. So when it happened, it definitely crushed me, more than any other death that I've ever experienced. So that was 2019. And yeah, it definitely crushed me, and affected the way I tried to hold it in a little bit. And then I ended up kind of internalizing it and then blowing up on someone else that I shouldn't have. And, so that's how I handled it. And then, with time, I've been able to kind of, just kind of accept it and try to move on. And just mostly in my life, I just tried to live nonviolently and try to have some sort of conflict resolution, communication, and things like that is what I was, trying to explain to my nephew, who is a whole different story. We'll talk about him later probably, but yeah, so Smoke was definitely someone who, who really had a good impact on not only just me, but a lot of young people in the community. And yeah, he definitely was taken too soon.
Yes, for sure. And I remember that when that happened when I found out, because I found out months later, but definitely a loss for the community. This was a brother who came from the streets, who changed his life, who became known in the industry for being somewhat of a celebrity tattoo artist, and had a huge following and built a great following and a beautiful business up on Camp Creek. And I remember always going in there to stop and speak with him. But Brother Shabazz, could you speak to this a little bit? Because this is what we're talking about, the internalized racism. Like you just said, you internalize that pain. And I believe a lot of brothers are walking around with a lot of emotion, deep emotion, deep pain that, then becomes misplaced. Mm-hmm. And oftentimes towards another person that looks like them.
Right.
You know? What would you say about that?
I got into a fight. He was a Black person, and it just, it was just misguided anger.
Mm-hmm. What would you say about that, Brother Shabazz?
Well, there's a lot to say to that. I think it's important to really understand the terms that we use when it comes to these type of I'm tempted to really put it into context and perspective, because internalized racism is one thing, internalized colonialism is another, and the level of self-hate is coming from us really feeling the frustration of disempowerment, if I may say it that way. And it's unfortunate that a lot of our brothers who are now resorting to respond to that, and I say more react than respond, because respond means response means to respond, be responsible, or able to respond. So we feel that we're at a point where we're not able to respond, so we react, and we react with that which is closest to us, and we attack that which is closest to us. And that's, because it's easier, it's convenient, and there's less consequences. Right. You see, when we talk about making the internal decision to express the sense of frustration that comes with being disempowered, then we find ourselves lashing out, which is really a lash in, if you will, of ourselves, because we really aren't disempowered. And it is designed to implode. It is designed to ensure that we depopulate ourselves, if I can say it in that way. And it just goes back to the Ma'afa, or the slave experience. So that when we were captured and we were kidnapped, and those of us who were here that were taken under captivity and made to hate each other, and really trained and to ensure that they didn't have to do as much work as possible. And I say that on the heels of what happened in Memphis recently.
Absolutely.
We have a semblance of what is called power, or the colonial power, or the power of the oppressor, coming through the policing agency or police terrorism, where the power of being able to enact that sense of anger and pain on ourselves is relentless, and this just the brutal nature of that murder of the brother in Memphis by 5 policy enforcers or police officers, who are actually colonial guardians to safeguard the elite. And so when we get those positions, we don't put ourselves in a position to really truly offset some of that, which could be, again, as you call it, internalized racism or internalized colonialism, where it's now neocolonialism, where we're now looking at ourselves as being the enemies, and it's unfortunate, because obviously I remember that case of the brother being who was a renowned tap artist, because that's what they are, who found himself in the middle of rage, the rage that comes from our streets. And they're also within that context, and let me apologize first. I want to thank you for inviting me. I'm really pleased to be on this platform with you. I'm really honored. Once you got that call and it was from you, I knew I had to respond in an appropriate form, because obviously, the work that you've been doing lends to all this discussion, and the work that you've been doing with end molestation. All this is a part of that internalized hatred and anger, and doing to ourselves or becoming what we detest, if I may.
Right. Indeed. Indeed.
But I think that, on a larger scale of things, when we look at it from the vantage point of how we can rectify, because I know this is a solution-based program, right? See it, decree it, and be it, right?
Absolutely.
I think it's important for us to utilize the platforms we have to enlighten, to edify, to empower each other, to know that there's no win in us killing each other.
Indeed.
Right? And I'm not saying this to advocate anything. Check how much of the oppressive society do we respond to when we know that there's a whole lot of systemic or systematized racism.
Absolutely.
It's built in. It's
Absolutely.
built into the fabric of this country and the history of this country.
Absolutely. And that was, you kind of touched on that. Well, you touched on that a great deal, really, which was going to be my next question to you was, what role has social construct played in this complex problem? And moreover, I want to have a space where we just don't, like you say, come and talk about the issue, but be solution-based.
Today's episode is sponsored by End Child Molestation, Inc., a 501c3 nonprofit organization whose mission is to combat child sexual abuse through education and empowerment.
We want to focus on what the goal is. Where do we go from here? How do we as a people come together and stop being outraged if you're not going to do something? Like, we have to find a way to channel our energy in a way that's productive for us and that's useful for us. Believe me, those brothers who, I think who committed this crime or allegedly committed this crime, nobody's going to be marching for them. The Police Lives Matter or whatever that whole movement was, the Blue Lives Matter, they're not going to be, because they're Black men.
Right.
They're Black men. And while we understand the whole history behind how the police force was created.
That's right.
Right?
Slave catchers.
The overseer.
Right, the slave catchers.
Officer, right?
They were slave catchers, right?
We understand that. Mm-hmm. I think the issue, of course, this issue in Memphis highlights two very important issues: the issue of police brutality and also the issue of Black on Black violence. It's like that highly publicized killing of the young rapper Takeoff back in November was floating all around the internet, right? And it was almost, what I saw was so disturbing, because it was almost like people was enjoying it, because this was something they were watching, a very graphic video, and sharing, right? And I went on social media yesterday, and I noticed a lot of people posting, campaigning for people not to watch this video of this young man being murdered. And it really highlighted for me the issue that we have in our society, where people actually we become so immune to seeing this type of heinous act. People actually, that now people actually crave that. They actually want to see it. Right.
Well, if I may interject, it's interesting. There's a point where Dave Chappelle does a skit in one of his stand-ups, and he talks about that when he asks one of his audience members how old they were, or he was. I think it was a he. And he says, "How old are you?" And they responded some young age of probably 18, 20 or whatever, but in that range. And he said, literally, you don't know nothing. He said that there was a time where before I knew who was on the phone, I had to answer it. Nowadays, everything is displayed. You know who's calling, you know when they called, all that kind of stuff. There's no call waiting. I mean, there's no. When last time you heard a busy signal?
Right.
What is that? What is that? Some don't even know what that is, a busy signal. But his point that he made to that, he was like saying that we've become so desensitized.
Yeah.
That there is so much overload of sensory infusion of trauma, drama, and everything that comes with that. To now, when you see something, you're not even reacting to it or responding to it because it's normalized, right? So what you're saying, to your point, is that we're at a point where when people are saying don't watch it, obviously it says don't think of a rhinoceros. It's hard to say don't do something, because the mind works.
Now they want to go see it even more.
So it really encourages it more than discourages it. And the people who say don't watch it, they already watched it. You know what I'm saying? So it's not like they heard about it and say don't watch it. They watched it and then say, oh, you shouldn't watch it. Correct. So I think that's kind of a little contradictory in terms of what's happening. But I also, because I had a message come to me earlier on about the same topic from a brother who I used to work with in New York, and he's in Carolina now, and he said to me, did I see it yet? I said, no, I haven't even seen it yet. because I understand the trauma that comes with that. And I know sometimes it's utilized to put us in a position where we have fear of moving through society because we find ourselves being gravitated toward or magnetizing that which is to be the victim. And I'm not saying this is not true, because we are victimized. And we're very much, targeted and victimized by the society at large because of what you stated, because of the slave catchers and the whole history of the police force in itself, why it was even formulated, or what was the origins of having a armed civilian population that goes around under the guise of enforcing laws, which is really policy. That's why they call them police officers, they're policy overseers or policy officers. But the point that I was going to make, that the conversation was had as to whether or not these type of public lynchings and public beatings and whippings is a legacy that comes from the way of terrorizing us as to not wanting to interact with them because they now become the threats to our very existence, our life force. And so when we find ourselves looking at these particular incidences, like, the saying goes back to when the brother was killed in California,
Rodney King,
and he was, and they watched, and you watch it over and over again. And even in the end of that clear evidence that they brutalized him and did a lynching and had him hooked to something like a lynch or a whip or whatever, they had him a rope and was whipping him senseless. They, after all said and done, got exonerated and got acquitted. Can you imagine seeing that brazen disregard for human life or humanity? And still, the only thing that comes across as being a victory is that he gets awarded some form of monetary amount that you think that they feel, because that's all we want is money, right? So when we start getting those things, and what our brother attorney at war, Alton Maddox, says, that it's really hush money. That money that you get paid for civil damages from those type of brutal things because of no community upheaval or community rebellion is hush money. So the immediate family comes out and tells everybody be cool, it's okay, don't do violence. And I'm not saying that we should advocate violence, but we should understand that the natural response to anything of such injustice is to respond in kind. That's a natural instinct. No animal on the planet or no species on the planet does not have a built-in response, a defense mechanism to something that's going to threaten their very existence, right? Mm-hmm. But when we start seeing these things, the historical context of those things have been to keep us suppressed and keep us repressed, and then we walk around with this sense of unbelongingness, right? We don't want to really truly push the envelope because we don't have the power to respond to something like that. So I think that when we talk about that, going back to our community, which is really the crux of what you're saying and the theme of this particular conversation, is to how we get reconnected to our community and how we start speaking to the youth. This whole idea of generational disconnect or a generational gap or something like that, it comes from us having the inability to communicate with our own, our offspring. Those are our children. So we have to become more and more sensitive, because, like I said, we've been desensitized. I want to go back to what I was saying about Dave Chappelle. He talked about a time when you were in class and a TV was rolled into the room.
Right. I remember those days.
I Googled about it. I don't remember. I'm not that.
I know you don't remember.
Maybe you can tell me about that, yeah. But a TV used to be rolled into the room, and you watched it. And at the time this TV was rolled into the room, they watched the space shuttle. Remember the space shuttle?
Yeah.
Where the 7 astronauts went up?
I remember that.
It just obliterated in midair. And it was clear that there was no one surviving that. But it was a trauma that was hidden and that was given and put on the youth at that time. But they sent them home, and they had to now do some type of what they call that, when after trauma in schools or public places, you have to have these type of psychological evaluations of people, how they're doing and all that. But I say it to say that nowadays, as to Dave Chappelle's point, there's so much going on, so many sensory overloads that there's no real response to it, as you and I, who are still little sensitive to things really know that something needs to happen. With them, it becomes normal. Violence on videos, sexual abuse, sexual violence, all that is natural on the gadgets, and it's an intentional way of keeping us from being self-determined and self-engaged or self-involved in helping our community.
It's a huge distraction from what's really going on. You're absolutely right. And, I long for really clear instruction and really clear continual efforts to do something about this very issue, because it is, a lack of mental health resources in our community is a big, big, big deal. I'm a registered nurse now,
Oh, well, congratulations. I didn't know that.
Yes. And
that's fitting. It's fitting.
And, one of the things that really inspired me to go into this field was just that, the lack of mental health support that we have in our communities is something that really, I believe, we desperately need. We need really to organize movements around that issue, around gaining resources, because a lot of other communities have these things in place, but we know collectively that Black communities or communities of color have more crime, have more sexual abuse, have more domestic violence, we know all of these issues exist. However, when it comes time to allocate funds and resources to these communities, we are always last in line. So, yes, and I just feel like that.
Well, I think it's an important point you make, though. I'm sorry, Chanel. I just want to make sure. Yes, we have more that's recognized as being untreated.
Absolutely.
Right? Because just as much as one of the things Dick Gregory always said back in the page, that you kill where you live. You kill those who are closest to you. So that's not a black on black is not a phenomenon of something that's it's not an anomaly. When it happens, wherever you live, you kill, right? And those closest to you. Then of course, there's more safeguards in place to check the behavior based on the resources that you just mentioned, because now you have ways to offset that, or if you control the media, you don't get the stories. Indeed. As our stories are put on the front to further disparage our capacity to be civil, as if this is the norm for our community. And you well know it's not true. Our community is as well placed and stable in areas that we know. There are parts and pockets that are totally unkept. But for the most part, the idea of what the media does, the corporate media, that is designed to, if it bleeds, it leads in terms of stories, right? Go into our communities to highlight the worst parts of our community. Whereas you just stated, myself, yourself, and others, who you invited onto this panel, know well that they're not, the stereotype or stigmatized to be that which is the problems of our community. And we do have them. And we have to come together as our community is to be and not be afraid of ourselves. See, most of the things that I used to live in before I got to Atlanta, I was living in Brooklyn, in Brownsville, Brooklyn, for the record. And I was listening to our brother earlier. He was talking about
I think we lost him.
Yeah, I don't see him on as well. But I was listening to him talk about the way the community has been in the streets and how wild it was, and he survived the streets. I think I'm paraphrasing what he stated. And I was thinking about my own life and what I can say I survived, because it was the same level of interactive destruction, self-destruction. I mean, you can find it. It wasn't like, I'll be living the glory days. No, those were the days that, it was really set up in pockets of gangs. The gangs were organized and they were very much, localized to areas. And there was a decree, there was a sense of respect and decree about what happened in the community. You didn't go around snatching pocketbooks, snatching change, all that things, because you had semblances of that, but it wasn't based on the self-destructive behavior of the community as we see today.
It was still a code of conduct.
It was a code of conduct, exactly. Right. So this is part of where we are, that we have been disheveled into this type of hatred, and this is part of what you've been speaking to, the self-hatred that's so deeply embedded in our psyche. When you talk about mental health, is that we don't, again, you hit on a great point about the fact that we are in denial about ourselves, our mental health. We don't go to psychiatrists. We don't go to have therapy. No. And this is the advantage that an uncivilized society, such as the one that we live in.
Right.
What they do to offset some of their bestial savagery is to have these type of clinical setups or clinician setups so they can be able to monitor and regulate some of the mental anger and anguish and energy that they do in terms of what happens. Serial killers and all that, we can go back and look at the difference in terms of the disparity relative to, if you will, melanin dominant communities versus melanin recessive communities. And we know well that they have their lot of it, you know, and there's a certain stereotypical way of looking at what they do and what we do versus crime, you know, and how that looks in terms of blue collar crime and how much suicide is in, you know, I mean, the power dynamic is different though, right? Mm-hmm. It's the power dynamic that shows the difference in terms of how things are displayed. You know, but when you look at it from the standpoint of knowing that the mental issues in our community are pervasive, because a lot of that is based on the overt racism of the systemic racism of the society in which we live.
Absolutely. A lot of it is the residue of that. And a wonderful word that you used, which when I misspoke, untreated. Mm-hmm. Untreated is the word, because, you know, when things left untreated, issues left untreated, it becomes a cancer. It becomes, you know, all disease left untreated progresses. Mm-hmm. And, you know, this is one that our society really needs to deal with. And I think as a Black woman, I have Black sons. I have Black brothers. I have a Black dad. I have Black uncles. I have Black men in my life who I love. You're one of them. And it's important that this matters. That young man who lost his life in Memphis matters to me. Mm-hmm. That could be my nephew, my son, you know. So this is the issue. I just think that when we witness these types of common occurrences, that we just really need to wake up right now. I hope that this, you know, young men die every day, I think grabs a lot of attention now, even in this particular cases. We're used to seeing Black men kill each other. Mm. But this time we happen to see 5 of them, you know, so it's the shock of seeing 5 of them. You know, we're used to seeing one Black man kill one Black man. That's an everyday common occurrence in hoods across unfortunately, you know. Mm-hmm. And at some point, we have to say enough is enough. Like, as a people, we have to come together and form a code of conduct. And consequences, and consequences.
Absolutely. And of course, from the revolutionary standpoint, we go back to the Black Panther Party and those organizations that were not just there to try to defend things that were overt. No, they were there helping to build community, free breakfast, you know, and things of that nature.
The WIC program, right?
Right. And you say that, but you don't hear that as being part of the historical reference point.
Right. They never referenced the fact that it was really a movement about community building.
Absolutely. And
not about
community. Sustainable
community. Absolutely, community building.
And that's why I called in this idea of mostly what we got to working with, Sister Chanel, is the revisionism. See, we have to work against revision, because people will take the history that was real and clear and make it something totally different, as if the so-called governing programs came out of the kindness and generosity and the benevolence of their heart. No, their programs were forced upon the government based on the community organizational galvanization and putting together that which was a demand that was a right to the people who lived in that community, because all communities which pay into the system, taxes or whatever the case may be, have the right to determine themselves and to protect that which is their immediate environment and surroundings. There's no reason why, and I mean environment to the degree of how well it's kept based on the refuse and the garbage and the things that we see that we left to just float around like it's okay, like if something's going to dissolve, like it's some kind of biodegradable substances, you know, and you see some of the mental health issues is where you can just throw something on the ground we're wondering where it's going to go.
Right.
And I'm not saying here to be self-critical to the degree that I'm making a judgment about it. It's a reality based on we call it a mindlessness, right? It's an absence of mindfulness, paying attention to the basic stuff, the basic things that are happening in our community. So we can start. How do we start? And based on what you're doing here, which is another part of a slew of those who are doing this work, that's using these platforms and taking the advantage of what it is to get a message out based on your activism, because you're an activist, you've been an activist as long as I've known you. And I want to say, it may seem to be going into some 20-odd years.
I know, right?
I mean, that's amazing to know from the time you were here and the time that you came through and the time you went through the process of reminding us and speaking loudly. I thought it was a voice in the night because I really didn't hear anybody overtly speaking about molestation of children and how pervasive it is in our communities. And what that means for those of us who are suppressing that and repressing that, that's part of the internalized anger.
Indeed.
Welcome to See It, Decree It, Be It, the inspiring podcast hosted by Chanel Swain. Join us on a journey of inspiration and transformation as we celebrate the power of resiliency.
It comes back and the people who hurt people, right? That's one of the cliches, right?
Indeed.
That's part of what we're working with. We have to come to a point where everything is based on, I think you might be right on it, is that we start from mental health.
Absolutely. I believe that.
Black men from killing black men. There's no way if I see you as myself, I'm going to kill myself.
And that's what I'm talking about, because if you, and that's why a shift in our mindset, our mind, it all starts from there. That's the foundation. And if the foundation is ruined, is contaminated, nothing good is going to grow out of that. Right. And so our mindset is very important. And that's the foundation. When you see yourself, when I know I'm a woman, there's no way in the world I can go out and kill another woman, another person. Right. Intentionally. Now, self-defense or something like that, I'm put in a position when I'm forced, so that's a different thing. Right. But to be in a space even where I'm so angry that I can't control myself, I have no tools, no internal fortitude,
no governance,
no self-governance, right? Where I can control myself. I let somebody else control me. Absolutely. Or a situation control me to the degree that I do something that's going to hurt me. Right. Because me hurting you is going to hurt me. I got to take myself with you. Ultimately.
And anger is one of those, again, mental issues, right? Mental health issues, the emotional issues go right into mental issues. The idea of anger has to be first felt before you can put it on anybody else. You have to have self-irritation. You have to have the level of discomfort that comes with being hateful and of yourself. Because how much anger, how much self-hate could be in a well that I can feel okay for saying that you should no longer have an existence on this dimension when I didn't bring you into this existence. That's the difference between when you're dealing with children and you say, I think you have put you in, I'll take you out. But when it comes to the external, the larger community, we have to determine whether or not we have enough love, self-love, to override some of the things that we know are inherent from our sojourn and our condition and our experience. And if we don't have a retrospect of history to support us, then we're never going to understand how you have this level of control where I say, I'm going to take something, as we've been dealing with all the time, that's going to allow you not to exist. Indeed. At the behest of your family and all the rest of people who love you. But see, what do we do? How do we do that in the context of what you're providing us? And this platform is, I'm telling you, it's amazingly a beautiful concept. I love, I love See It, Decree It, Be It. I think you might have got that from me or something.
You know what? Hey,
I know. No, the wisdom of it, the wisdom is in my flavor. And that's part of, because while we have to know how to affirm what we are going to change, because that's what the word sound does for us. We have to have a script, we have a narrative that supports us. We have to have, what is our model? What is our affirmation affirmation that we have to look at, underscore. And I think that what you're doing here with this particular platform is tremendous to make that happen.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And really, you're right. It's about having a strong sense of self, a strong sense of self. When you value yourself.
Yeah.
When you value yourself.
Self-esteem, isn't it? That's self-esteem, right?
Indeed.
Because the word esteem is the past part of the word estimate. How we estimate ourselves. What's the value that we have when we look at ourselves and see ourselves in the body of, in the personage of another one that looks just like you. Absolutely. And I'm saying to you, it can run across the whole humane spectrum. But when it comes to your first thing is the first law of nature, right? Self-preservation. That doesn't mean your individual selfish way of surviving, but you must have a plan for yourself as well, so you can be able to extend that to others. Because all the self-work that you have done, we all have to do self-work because a lot of us are victims or have experienced trauma or have been on the receiving end of somebody perpetrating, their level of mental illness on us, whether it be through molestation, whether it be through this abuse, emotional, whatever. We have to determine how we rebuild ourselves and override some of that so we can have the unconditional love for family, for friends, for loved ones that can support us to make sure we build a community that sustains us. Otherwise, we're under self-destruction and we're doing the work of those who don't want us to be present anyway. So we become the unhidden hand of that which is already plotting our demise. Because why? Because we look different, because of our appearance, you see. And then because we have no awareness, then our appearance leaves us gullible and vulnerable to the abuse.
You say that so beautifully. Listen, what you just said is going to be a beautiful clip that I hope goes viral for the world to see, because that is everything. That is everything. And then it, like you said, it beautifully ties into mental health. Mm-hmm. It really all starts there because, you look at some people, you see some people who have experienced great trauma, right? Or great loss, or have really unpleasant experiences, who actually grow to be resilient people who do great things, right? But when you have people who have a low capacity, a low threshold for pain, or even not even have the mental, again, fortitude to navigate through that maze of emotional distress, that's where you get the lashing out. And I believe that mental health really is a pervasive problem in our community. I believe that there are a lot of undiagnosed illnesses running rampant in our communities. And I believe it is the culprit for many people demise, really, and cause for their disregard for life.
And I think when you said the value, how you value yourself, I think it's also having a sense of self-worth or a sense of purpose, right?
A sense of absolutely. That's all. It's all a piece of the pie.
If you don't have a reason for being, or don't know that there's something for you to do uniquely, even in the experience of trauma, and the drama that you have to experience could be a fuel in an organic way of invigorating a higher purpose, right? Absolutely. And I say that, because I know your story, and I know what motivated you was to say, I was going to end the cycle, the cycle of dysfunction, the cycle of pain, the cycle of mental illness, by being that which is an example of my own experience. Because a lot of times people pick up something and you can be purposeful, right. But is it really full of a purpose?
Absolutely.
You see, because the purpose, as the word implies, is a pure possession, right? Purpose, pure possession of your life path, and coming back to give back, to be a servant, to be of service, to bring back and say that I'm not going to sit around. I'm not going to be basking in the energy of my trauma, or I'm going to take
no victim.
That's right.
I am no victim.
Absolutely. And I said, and people say, sometimes we say that, and people say that they try to say it in a dismissal of the reality that they've been victimized.
Absolutely.
But when you talk about I'm not a victim, like you just stated in the affirmation way, because you're not going to let that be your launch.
Absolutely.
Because you could do that as a choice. It's a free will choice for you to say, I'm the one walking around with all these issues in my tissues, and using that as a basis for my story. That's how I tell my story.
Absolutely.
And the reason why I can't be functional, or I can't interact with somebody, or I can't continue to be in a way that's normal, is because I'm operating off the trauma of somebody else's, perpetration.
Indeed. And that's great. That's beautifully said. And I tell people all the time that, and particularly when I speak with people who have been, who have a victim mindset, because I come in contact, as you know, with many people who have been abused because of the work that I do. Right. And I always encourage them to not focus on their history, but focus on your destiny. And really, the reason why I can say boldly, I'm not a victim. I had a bad experience, but I don't wear that label. I don't accept that label as being a victim. What that did for me was it highlighted for me a pervasive problem that's going on. It highlighted for me.
Like it didn't start with you. It didn't start with you. You just in that flow of everything that's been happening for many, many, many centuries. Indeed. And that's part of the denial too, though, Chanel, is that we don't want to deal with the fact that this is something that our community, particularly the melanin dominant community of people of African descent, we really truly have this, don't say nothing, be quiet, because we already are ashamed of our history relative to slavery and the Ma'afa. So a lot of our shame comes from us having to deal with an overt system that was in place that was legally designed to keep us from developing and growing, if not for the betterment of the larger society. So most of what we do and have done is to work on behalf of or for the betterment of those who were the captors or the enslavers or inherited the enslavement. Because a lot of these so-called wealthy individuals that walk around talking about they got billions of dollars, they didn't get that just because they showed up. They got that because of the entitlement they had with the privilege of that which was the recessiveness of their skin. Right. And they utilize, and some of them even inherited through their bloodline, from the chain of slavery that was happening in that era, where it was 200 years of unpaid servitude.
Absolutely.
Right? And now we're looking at a position where we're talking about reparations. Well, that's a large aspect. But right. The internal, what you said, this is clear. The internalized reparation is what we need. If we don't repair ourselves, no one can repair us from external.
That's it. And that's a wonderful way to close out of this. And you said it so beautifully. If we don't heal ourselves, we can't, nobody's coming to save us. And I will say this, that what I've learned in my 49 years of being in this world is that I know, right?
Wow. So I didn't know you're going to increase your age for this process, but go ahead.
I know, right? But what I have learned is that, just like I said a few minutes ago, we had no control over our history in terms of things that happened before us, but we have full control over our destiny.
That's beautiful.
We have full control over our destiny.
Statement that can really be an affirmation for everything. That you don't have control of the history because it's seemingly past. But you can live there and find yourself dysfunctional living there. Because why? Because you're back there when you can't be in the moment, in the present, which is really what your destiny is, where you are. And where you are can allow you to spiral and to prepare yourself into never again, as it is stated, that you have to repeat the history because we have to break the cycle of pain. So you said about, we have to determine what we're going to do. And you said our behavior. And I wanted to say further that when we talk about savior, our behavior is our savior. That's what's going to contain us and to make sure that we have the capacity to remain on this planet. There are those who really don't want you to be present on this plane.
And I'm sorry, you
No, go ahead. Absolutely.
You're right. And to add to that, when people benefit from your brokenness, they don't want to see you healed.
Right. Healing for them, right. Healing for them is like the system in which we live. Even the medical system that we rely upon and we go and we invest a lot of our energy and money into. By and large, you go in sick, you come out sick. You go in sick, you may not come out at all. And then it's very rare that you come out of there with some type of new life that's more invigorating, and except for the fact that you may be now enslaved to pharmaceuticals.
Yes, absolutely.
So, and then of course that's a business decision, right? Because when we go into these places, that's a bit, you're a customer. I know you want to close out, but I had the undue task of dealing with my mother in that system, my father as well. And the idea that when you go in a system, then you are now beholden unto them, and you can't tell them anything, which is a mindset. We believe that, but it's the same thing as any other business. You're the customer. The customer makes a decision as to what kind of treatment you're going to allow. You don't get dictated to. You don't let them tell you what you're going to do. They don't tell you to come leave the room because I'm getting.
They can give you advice.
They can advise.
They can make a suggestion.
There you go. But see, that's the whole thing about power, though, Chanel. Is that we're so disempowered. We believe that because the place is so intimidating, right? You got these Byzantine walls and these marble floors and all this money that's put into keeping you to believe that this is the official medical decision for your life. And it really isn't. It really isn't. They can diagnose, and then you can determine what you want to do with the diagnosis, and you pay them for that service of diagnosis. But they don't make the determination that you're going to be my permanent customer, where I'm going to keep you coming back and forth with no real system of a treatment that can make you independent of me. You see, and it sounds kind of sinister to hear it like that. But yeah, there are things you want to go there for. If you get a laceration, you want to go get sold up. That's one thing. But when it comes to those chronic diseases, which I may also give you the overload of what I do with that, because my main thing is that I'm always spoke about making peace with your parents. That's one of my, campaigns, right? As your mission is the molestation, yes. Mine is to make peace with your parents. And people think that's an objectified a mission. That's a subjective.
We need to go deep on that, yes.
It's subjective. And that means that if you really truly love yourself, love your parents as those who provide you access, regardless of whatever comes up based on their lack of support or their abuse, whatever. That's notwithstanding.
No attachments to that.
Yeah, because the reality is that you wouldn't have a body without that contribution. I'm not saying that you should give a pass or you're vindicating them or you're absolving them. You don't have the power to do that either. You know what I'm saying? Because the universe takes care of everything in perfect balance. Everyone's going to account for whatever their behavior was, and that's what they're going to have to deal with. You don't have any attachment, as you just stated, to that, but your attachment is to yourself as the complete embodiment of those two chromosomes, 43, 46, 23 by 2, that you are now sitting in the chemistry of. And what your thoughts about that is a subjective, I can say I hate my father all day long without that being translated into hating half of myself.
Absolutely.
How can that help me develop in a healthy way? And it may sound, it's just mumbo jumbo. It's real when you start to think about it. Because you're not, I don't say you have to go run and find them, dig them out of the grave and say, I forgive you, I love you, No, you're loving yourself as them unconditionally because you are them together forever, right? So the divorce or the dividing of the force that happened within the context of your social upbringing is the fact that how much do I love myself as them to support them in knowing that I'm going to be them together forever. And I'm giving them the opportunity to be healthy as me. And this is part of what my mental clearing is, my mental health represents.
Yes,
okay?
that is good.
Bring me back for that discussion.
Listen, I'm going to hold you to it because as you were talking and speaking of that, two people popped in my mind. I'll share a quick story with you. Mm-hmm. A young man who I mentored years ago sent me a message about 2 months ago and on Facebook. And I hadn't talked with him. He's actually a relative, but I hadn't seen him in years, but I used to mentor him. Anywho, he lives in Philly now. He started a mentorship program, and he reached out to me, and it was a blessing to hear from him and to hear what he had to say. And it was really, honestly, a conversation that I had forgotten about. But he reached out to me because he wanted to thank me for something I said to him when he was struggling with his dad being in prison. And it was such a beautiful text. I saved it. And I said, wow, I'm going to always remember this because, and it's funny when he brought it up to me, I said, wow, that's something because I just spoke to someone about this very subject. Like that same week, I had just mentored someone on this subject about
so it was
pain.
a synchronicity, right? Yeah.
Yes, pain with his father. And it was almost word for word what I shared with him. And I said to him, it was really about, he was in a lot of pain, and he was really resentful of his dad for not being there. His dad had been incarcerated, and, you know, the common story that's in the hood. And I shared some wisdom with him about that, and just how, you know, could have been a blessing that he was not there in terms of.
Oh man, thank you. And I'm saying to you, we don't know the impact that we have on anybody. And that's why we have to be guarded with our wisdom. Make sure that you respond in a way that's responsible. Yes. And that allows you to be able to know that any moment somebody can be impacted by your sense of sensibility, right? Because sometimes we're so insensitive, and because our own pain comes into play, we might even encourage them, no, the hell, he ain't there, your father, he left you.
It's a huge responsibility.
Oh man, it's major. But this goes back to maybe coming full circle to your talk about how do we deal with the violence that we have on ourselves. The black men on black men, or men on men, or whatever the case may be, is going back to what you're saying, that we think that the idealism is over. My father was a man, you know, that's why you use the victim story to justify your dysfunctional behavior. But when your father...
Today's episode is sponsored by End Child Molestation, Inc., a 501c3 nonprofit organization whose mission is to combat child sexual abuse through education and empowerment.
Not being there, you don't know their story. And because we're so desensitized and we're so insensitive to the fact that we don't even know our parents' story.
Right.
How many times do we find out what was going on with you that you would think that it's not okay to be
right?
You know, and what will make you feel good about that? Because no parent naturally doesn't want to be with their father.
Indeed.
Or be with their children, or be in the context of that which supports, you know, a stable homestead. Because we think about the things about what we watch on TV, and we watch too much damn TV to then now use the interpretation of real life. But like you said, and this is an important key thing you just stated, that you don't know what he could have been there for you. And I'm saying you don't have to even speculate about that, because his absence may be the best thing that happened to you, versus him being there and being maybe dysfunctional and disruptive to your very development.
Absolutely. It was perfect in its timing, because that same week there was something going on in the news where this young brother, a rapper, I don't even remember the rapper's name, but it was that same week, and he was killed somewhere in California. And when they caught the guy who killed him, it was a father-dad duo.
Wow.
Can you imagine? It was a father. The dad drove the getaway car.
Wow.
The son went in and robbed this young man, all black men, right? Isn't that, it's deep, you know?
It's amazing how they collaborated on such a heinous crime.
And I use that as an example. And he said, wow, I didn't even know that. I said, yeah, go look it up. And he sent me a message the next day, and he was like, wow. He was like, I didn't even know that. I said, this is a clear example of what I meant when I said to you, his example because of where he was in his life and on his journey in that season, his example could have been more damaging to you than his absence.
You don't know. And I'm saying to you, I think it's also I think that it may be irresponsible or disingenuous to tell somebody that, you know, well, no, let me say it like this, because I want to make sure I don't want to confuse this too. That because what it is, you know, if you don't have a parent there, then you don't have a parent there, you can't undo that. You can't change that story, make it something that is not, right? But if you have the parent there, because mostly you'd be surprised how many parents present have more problems and dysfunction than their parents absent. This whole idea that's an idealism that, you know, we put on around. So, oh yeah, the level of coming together as a collective family, father, mother, daughter, whatever, son, is highly society in which we live, in a society that doesn't support the sustainability of village community interaction and interchange. But when we talk about the standpoint, when you tell somebody the reason why you're this way because your father wasn't there, then you give the impression or give the notion that this is the way. If you didn't have it, then you weren't going to be able to do anything functional, which is not true, because it's not an absolute.
Absolutely.
That's my point. If I'm underscoring anything, be mindful and be careful of absolutes.
Yes.
Because when we do absolutes, then we change the fabric of things that are flexible enough to know that we're never in a fixed state of anything. The universe and the creator has divinely planned. And I'm not saying to dismiss things that we know that are very egregious and out of hand, because we can fix those things based on free will and choice, right? But when it comes to understanding, when you're trying to help somebody develop them through it, you're RA, you know therapy. You've been dealing with that for as long as I've known you. To know how to approach somebody and be careful and mindful.
Mindful, absolutely.
How you treat, right? Because if you treat them in a way that brings your own pain to situation, because sometimes we say, well, let me tell you how, girl, and then before you know it.
Right, and listen, I had an unpleasurable experience with my father growing up, so I could have naturally said, right. Hey, but I just have grown or evolved to a space where I understand that that may not have been in my best interest.
No, it's clear.
In terms of my growth and development.
It's clear, because you're saying your father and your mother, whoever, they taught you just the same, what not to do. That's Absolutely. A valuable lesson too. That's a valuable,
and that's exactly what I was saying to him. I said, listen, now you have clear examples of things not to do with your children. You have clear examples. And so I'm so happy that you brought that up, because I definitely want to have a conversation with you. And I'd love to invite those two brothers to come and have a conversation with us. Absolutely. and with you, because the whole reason for me wanting to connect with 5 brothers. I actually host a group shortly on Sundays at 5:00 with women. Mm-hmm. It's about 25 women in a group.
Oh, beautiful.
Yes. And this is not a subject I necessarily want to talk about with them. They're women. I wanted to speak with Black brothers, Black men, about Black men, about what do you think the solution should be, right? And I think it's really important for brothers to have, we need a sense of community. I think that is what's needed in days like this, particularly for Black brothers. Right. And I know
But when you also say, given that scenario and given that example, that's what happens, right? Say, for example, when the whole school gets shot up, or like I was talking about earlier, they bring in all the experts to help work people through that trauma. The same way we look at the system and the police and what they have been doing, who knows, from time to now, they've been doing the same thing. Now we look at it from a standpoint of our own doing it to each other, which we still lose the sight of, that we're talking about the level of systemic racism that even affects those of us who have the appearance of color or hue or dominance of melanin. You know what I'm saying? We get caught up in this idea that there's some kind of uniqueness around things that happen to. No, we know what the level of that has done. And so therefore it's traumatic. That's why I was resistant to looking at it, even though I'm at a level of my own consciousness that I can look at it.
Yeah, I have no desire to look at it.
I can work it. But why I want to see what I've been seeing, I know how it looks. I know what it looks like. Well, okay, this is one of the things I want to say. I'm glad we brought it back to that. Because remember, if you watch any of those crime stories, whatever, and they do the forensics on it, and it depended on the extent or the extreme of the violence or whatever happened, the brutality, they talk about how personal, right? If you stab somebody once is one thing. Stabbing them 40 times, There's a personal thing. There's a lot of persons. You don't keep doing it, and that's it. You said
crimes of passion, they call it.
Right, crimes of passion. Yeah. But you said the word outrage. I want to say the word enraged.
Mm-hmm.
You see, which is the same thing, and it has its correlation, right? That the
enraged then is outwardly displayed.
There you go.
Yes.
Right, and then we have this thing that is outrageous. To watch such a thing happen, to watch these things unfold before our very eyes, to show you how deeply seated is the racism and the level of bigotry that we have around what we represent for the society in which we live. And it's not just about the dominance of our melanin. It's a mindset. And the camaraderie that we don't no longer have, or we don't have instances of that, because I don't want to, again, absolutes is dangerous, right? So there's pockets of that which needs to be transformed into us being able to have a dialogue that speaks to the rationalization of things as opposed to coming to a conclusion that this is the way it is and that we are always being killed. And I'm saying we are being killed. There are those, but we're not being killed to the degree that we are absolutely saying that we are being killed, because you and I wouldn't be here now. But there are cases where it happens where we have to respond. That it is unacceptable to take out any kind of race, whether you be in a melanin-dominant skin or melanin-recessive skin, but in the context of what we call blue lives, but they call this idea around what you wear as a uniform. You wasn't born with no uniform on that's blue. You were born in a place of your own natural affinity to be humane and to be able to use that humanity. How could you be in a collective of 5 men? You said 5, you wanted 5 men. With how significant it is that you said I want 5 black men to speak to what it is about black men killing, because you want to give another perspective of saying that every black man is not killing every black man.
Absolutely.
So now I understand the rationale why you decided to do it in that way. But how can they sit there and all be okay with this level of intense brutality, of the anger that you have around being disempowered?
That is the point. That is the point, because, they all had to be on one accord in mindset.
How can you be well, I say that rhetorically speaking, and maybe not. How can you be in a crowd knowing that you keep doing it, you're doing it, and I don't know how it looks. I can imagine, because you know what, I always say I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I'm a historian. If you know history, you don't have to be a conspiracy theorist because you got reference points. Right? So you don't have to say, I was a theory by theory.
You have receipts, as they say, right?
Absolutely. I would give you an opportunity to see what we know is to be a reality and what the potential of that type of insidiousness that happens on the regular. So you have to say, oh, maybe it was a conspiracy. And my theory is, no, the reality is that if you have historical reference points, you can go and point to it. And therefore, you know that the capability of it happening again is very well and very probable. But when it comes to understanding the dialect of our capacity to become, if you will, compassionate, there you go, there's the word. To be compassionate is to be, as the word implies, a compass, which is the root of the word compassionate, is to be a directional force to guide someone. I mean, there's sympathy. You can have sympathy within that is also a guide, because it's the path in that, right? Sympathy. And you can feel sorry for somebody because you know it's a terrible thing to have somebody die in that force, in that sense. Now, you can also have empathy. You can say, oh, yeah, I know when it happened. I can identify with it, right? Empathy is another path. But the only thing that really gives us any guidance to get to a destiny versus the history is being able to have a compass and to be the one, what they call is the good Samaritan, to help one move along on the path or their journey by pouring into their head, the balm of healing so they can move forward and there's no attachment to them. No codependent sympathy and no codependent empathy. But you have that, but you have a compass or compassion to move them to come to pass on, move them forward. Yeah. How's that? Huh?
That is it. That's the mic. That's the mic drop right there. I thank you for showing up, Brother Shabazz. It has been an honor and an immense pleasure. And I look forward to my time with you again tonight on your program at midnight. I will be there. And again, this is the honorable, the legendary Wanique Shabazz.
Be careful of that. To whom much is given, much is expected. So I want you to pipe it down a little bit.
Listen, and it has been an honor to have him and Brother Brian. I don't know. I don't know if his phone, we lost him at some point, but thank you for showing up and being a part of this discussion.
Anytime. I'm here for you, sis. Anytime you have anything you want to provide opportunities for such a wonderful discussion, and because you have been doing some beautiful work, which I want to emphasize that tonight we're going to go deeper. It's going to be my turn. We're going to turn the tables on you.
Yes.
It's my turn again to get you to talk more about what you represent. And I love your humility and even your modesty, because, a lot of times, we get on these platforms and, we want to be grandiose about it, but it's okay to do that in the context of being able to say that we have to give credibility to what we represent. But you are very credible, and you have the credits of what you have been doing, and really truly it's a very poorly or minimally spoken topic. And I'm telling you, because I myself, it was in the context of my own family structure, I have experience of that and know what it can be. And know those who are still suffering, as you say, internal suffering, because they need that level of therapy to move them past those areas of their trauma. Because we don't want to minimize and say, "Oh, you should get over it, don't be a victim." No, we're not saying that. We're saying that what are you doing to help yourself work through that? And oftentimes, as you have proven, the way you do that is become have a mission within the context of that. And you're going to share more about that tonight.
Absolutely. And finding purpose. Like you said, purpose is everything, because, everybody's path is different. It may not be for someone who has been abused to start an organization and to do advocacy work. They may be called to do something in a different way, or to use their life to serve, because I believe it's all about service. They may be called to use their lives to serve in a different way. But what we don't want to do is to build an identity off of something that happened to you, off of a painful experience. And that's what I see happening, and which is why it has kept me on this journey. So thank you for.
So did it happen for you?
It happened for me. Absolutely. It happened for me. Like, I'm nobody's victim. Listen, I believe that, I was chosen for a time such as this. I really believe that, I believe
you don't have to believe it.
You already know that's.
Believe me is a doubt that it exists, and you're not sure how to give reference to it. You're living it. You know it.
I know it.
I know the word belief is a nice one we put in there and seems like it fits, but sometimes it's a denial of the reality of what
you're right. You're right.
And you know it. You know it.
I know it.
Hey, what did Bob Marley say? Him who feels it knows it.
I know it. I know it. I feel
Absolutely.
it.
I
see it, decree it, and be it. So
I love it. I was going to tell the brother who was with us. His name was what?
Brian.
What's his full name?
Brian Ellison.
So he's the last word in your be it.
Yes.
As an acronym. So I was going to point that out when I heard you first say. I said, okay, that's why he's here.
Oh, I have to say that to him. Well, thank you again, Baba Wanik, and I will see you at midnight.
Absolutely. Thank you, sis. All right. Much love to you.
Much love.
All right.
Peace.
Thank you for listening to See It, Decree It, Be It, the podcast, hosted by me, your girl, Chanel Swain. It has been an honor and a privilege to serve you, and I look forward to having conversations like this every Monday and Friday at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. See you Friday.